All right, this is part one of three-part introduction to architecture, going into postmodernism at the end. So it's kind of got a storyline. It's got a point to it. Part one, we're going to go up from the very beginning, earliest human constructions up until the end of the Roman Empire and Constantine, fall of the Western Roman Empire. And part two, we're going to go from fall of the Western Roman Empire up until the Eiffel Tower. And part three will be the Eiffel Tower until today, which is where we get back to the postmodernism. Architecture. Why architecture? Well, there's three parts to this course. So I'm probably going to mention at the beginning of all of them. We're going from Vasari. All art history books used to just have three subjects in them. It was painting, sculpture, and architecture. So we're following that. That comes from Vasari. Giorgio Vasari, 1550, published Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. And this is really when we begin to get artists as we understand artists today in the 21st century. They're no longer craftsmen. They've been great artists in the past, but more artists are a little like gurus today. So we're getting them starting to come. With Vasari, we get like, oh man, Leonardo was a genius. He was a special kind of guy. If you ever saw that show, it's like I can't remember. It's got this young Leonardo, Leonardo's ghosts, Leonardo's demons, young Leonardo solving problems. Yeah, that's kind of from Vasari. You know, he's starting to make artists into more than mere mortals, and that's going to start with him. But anyway, he divided everything up into these three simple categories. So you pick up an art history book from really before the early 20th century. That's it. It was just architecture, painting, and sculpture. Now it's anything goes with conceptual art. But that's a different lecture. Okay, we're going to go from architecture, and we're going to end the sort of overarching theme is where we get at today with is postmodernism. We're going to get into postmodernism at the end. We're going to build up to it because postmodernism is a reaction to modernism. Architecture itself, the architects were the leading postmodernists in the sense that it's easiest to understand postmodernism, which is an incredibly difficult concept to grasp. Don't feel bad if you find it confusing. Everybody finds postmodernism confusing, but it's easiest to understand when you go through architecture. Architecture in general, it's functional. It's practical. It's of the arts. You really don't need painting. You don't need sculpture. You need architecture. You got to have a roof over your head. Got to keep out of the elements, and that's a practical effect to it. But most of the art will be in the design, and the design of architecture is going to be fashionable. A building from 1550 does not look like a building built in 1950, and it's different fashions from around the world, though. Now everything's pretty international. Everybody dresses the same now. It's kind of unusual to see anybody that's wearing traditional garb. And we'll all be wearing spandex and capes soon enough, just like the comic books told me when I was growing up. I say that buildings from 1550 look different than buildings from 1950. Just to give you an idea of how confusing postmodernism is. Yeah, postmodernism is going to turn that on its head too. Not necessarily with postmodernism. Maybe a building built in 95 looks like a building from 1795. That's part of postmodernism. That's easy to recognize. That's an old-fashioned looking building. That's postmodernism because it was just built a few years ago. Simple. Postmodernism in general, not a lot you can say about it. One thing we can say about it is it's a reaction against modernism, hence the name postmodernism. It's after modernism. So you have to look at modernism. I think most people kind of get what modernism is. It's all about new and Jetsons and such, the future. and postmodernism is gonna be a rejection. Let me give you a simple example that I would say is the worst idea of modernism. Modernism's news better, man. That old-fashioned stuff just didn't work as well. We know better today. Okay, well, what about the electric chair? I mean, electric chair is one of the most horrifying ways to execute someone. No matter how bad you are, you don't deserve that, man. Well, but like, I mean, a firing squad, quick, efficient. Guillotine's quick and efficient. Hanging is, I wouldn't want to be hanged, but anyway, you get the point. The electric chair was somehow supposed to be a better way of killing people. Maybe lethal injections, maybe postmodern, a little more. Anyway, I don't know. Somebody's probably written a dissertation on that. Okay, so and another thing you can say about, besides it's a reaction to modernism. Postmodernism is the end of grand narratives. The end of grand narratives. Everybody agrees on that. Postmodernism includes the end of grand narratives. Postmodernism is the end of grand narratives. So when you hear someone say, and you might have heard the term postmodern Marxism, we can't say a lot about postmodernism definitively, but we can say it is the end of grand narratives. And if Marxism is anything, it is a grand narrative. It explains everything. It's all about the exploitation of the proletariat by the capitalists. That's it, man. That's the explanation of all of life's mysteries. So that's as grand a narrative as you get. So yeah, postmodern Marxism doesn't make any sense. So beware if anybody that uses that term. And one thing that really will affect art, this is going to really affect art, this is a very important part of art and postmodernism, is postmodernism blurs the lines and categories between things. Before postmodernism, there was a real hierarchy in the arts, painting and sculpture, architecture up on top because of Vasari. Architecture probably dropped a little bit, and then slowly down you get like graphic design, basket weaving. When postmodernism came in, and really with conceptual art, which we'll talk a lot about in this course, anything can be art. So the Sistine Chapel becomes equal to the ashtray you made in a ceramics class you took, to meet some hot girl you thought you'd hook up with, and you totally failed too, man. What's your problem? But hey, look, at least you got a ceramic ashtray out of the deal. Now, if you don't know, postmodernism really falls into one of the big general classes of philosophy today, and this is a little sophomoric, but you can divide the philosophical schools between analytic, which is Anglophile, the English-speaking world. I subscribe to analytic philosophy. England, United States, almost everything except art and maybe religion are taught in an analytic fashion. Basically just science, clear language. It's kind of maybe part of the English character. Who knows? But anyway, it's definitely New Zealand, Germany too. Germany, New Zealand, Australia, England, of course, Ireland, everybody. Anyway, that's analytic philosophy. It's just basically straight talk, science, clear sentences. And the other school of philosophy, again, this is kind of sophomoric, really simplifying things, is continental, the continent. What we're talking about are the French. And it's not like science. Continental philosophy is more like poetry. That's why it's hard to understand. The postmodern writers, Foucault, Derrida, they're just bad writers. I mean, I think they're bad writers. They just, I mean, I can't say bad in a postmodern sense, but I can say they're definitely not clear. You can almost read anything into it. It's like poetry. It's like the will o' the wisp. Analytic philosophy, they have the opposite problem. I read a book on analytic philosophy. They couldn't get beyond the first sentence. They started, well, what do we mean by and is? And then a whole book is like 200 pages. It's like, what is the point of this? Why don't you go mow the lawn or something? Why'd you even write this book? Yeah, analytic philosophy is almost become a subcategory of linguistics. But anyway, okay. But okay, so there's continental philosophy and analytic philosophy, and postmodernism falls within continental philosophy. It's a little hard to understand. It's a little vague. And finally, another great reason to study postmodernism through architecture, besides it's the easiest way to understand it, is it's interesting to look now and see what the architects are doing now. Because whatever's coming after postmodernism, I'm telling you, it's coming from architects. Because these new buildings that they're putting up today, this is July 2023, I'm making this. They've been making these kind of buildings. Things are going to change within the next few years. That's not postmodernism. You'll understand. If you don't understand, you'll understand by the end why it's not. This is something new. Deconstructivism is one of the names they throw around. I don't think that's going to stick. It's not a very good name, but it does fit in with postmodernism because it has to do with fragmentation and disorientation. Just, there are no categories and such. Okay, let's actually get down to the beginning of time, the beginning of architecture. The very first continually inhabited area that we know of as, again, July 2023, Göbekli Tepe. This is in Turkey. We're looking at maybe 9,500, 8,000 BCE. The oldest permanent settlement we know of yet. I'm thinking there's all kinds of huge Atlantis-type cities up under the Sahara, but there's no proof of that whatsoever yet. So we start with Göbekli Tepe, 9,500 years old. That's pretty old. We have no idea, and this relates back to postmodernism. We have no idea what this was used for. It was only we knew that there was something here. There was some old ruins here. There's ruins all over around there. It wasn't until 1994 that they finally realized how old this was. And it's in the middle of nowhere. Now, there's no water. There doesn't seem to be any water around it. Cities tend to grow up where it's convenient, like right around some water. That's handy. Be able to have something to drink. You don't die of thirst. So we're not really sure what this is used. It's a totally different society. Humans are basically the same as humans always been. At least 100,000 years, maybe 250,000 years. So they were similar to us, but even us, being us, develop all kinds of weird civilizations. So we really don't know what was going on here. There's just tons of different theories. Maybe they don't think people lived here, but maybe that's only being extremely conservative. Maybe it was just a place that people would gather once a year because they didn't seem to be permanent settlements, and you'd be able to find something, old garbage, dig through their garbage. All right, so that's about 9,500, 8,000 BCE. Civilizations will pop up small here and there. Well, we really want to jump to about 2,500. That's when things really take off. Egypt is really in its prime, and when Egypt's Egypt, nothing touches it. Nothing touches Egypt. Nobody's built anything like it. But around 2,500 BCE, we're going to have Egypt. We're going to have Egypt, Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates, right there, not too far from Egypt. They're pretty close. Mohenjo-Daro in India was about the same time, and in Peru, Norte Chico in Peru was about 2,500, about the same time. Think about what was going on in England at the time. We got Stonehenge, which is fine. That's a neat thing. But I saw these two guys with a pickup truck and some rope lift a Stonehenge rock on the Discovery Channel or something, maybe in Popular Mechanics magazine. I can't remember. Nothing like Egypt. Nothing like Mohenjo-Daro or Mesopotamia. So really you have these four areas that we know of. We can't be sure. The Niger River Valley, I wouldn't be surprised if we discover something coming up there. But anyway, right now, let's say Egypt. Egypt's huge, and there's no denying Egypt. Even covered up by the sands when Napoleon found it. This place is huge. Nothing's ever been like this before. They're just knocking it out. This is here you go. Look at the size of this thing, and here's the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut built into the wall, just carved into the mountain. It's incredible. Think that Cleopatra, Egypt is so old. Cleopatra lives closer to our time than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids. It's just enormous civilization. This is neat. A lot of people don't know this. I find this interesting. If you don't know this, you're not going to forget it. The Sphinx has a tail. Yeah, man, you get behind the Sphinx, it's got a tail. It's supposedly built about the same time as the Great Pyramids. I've seen the ancient astronaut people say it's a lot older now. Man, it's like 9,000 years old. I don't know. It's hard to date rock. But yeah, Sphinx got a tail. Sphinx got a tail. This is Egypt today. So yeah, the pyramid's big and was the tallest building in the world, and we'll talk about it in a second, for the longest time, but it's nothing compared to today. And Cairo it's a big city, but it's not, it's not Beijing. It's not New York or London. But boy, they got electricity and elevators and a lot more people living there. So yeah, Industrial Revolution made a real big deal. Mass production. So there's just a change. Everything really before the Industrial Revolution, everybody was sort of on an equal level. But after the Industrial Revolution, but now now everybody's back on an equal level again. It works. It works. The science, the analytic philosophy, you say, not the continental philosophy. You could have been reading poetry instead of building a widget making gadget. Not too far from Egypt, you have Mesopotamia, the area between the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is all about the land. The Nile River in Egypt would flood every year and recede and it'd leave the land just incredibly fertile. So you just throw a seed out there and you walk back the next day and there's a beanstalk going up to the sky. Mesopotamia too is just really not as quite as good as Egypt. They had to build canals, which they did over time, but really it was a good place to live. You're always going to have people growing up around just good places to live, obviously. Göbekli Tepe is kind of an odd, but it's older. It's who knows? Certainly they would know if they would know if there was a river there. People got to know that. They got to know that. So maybe it's just still a mystery as far as we know. A lot of these cities were pre-planned, really well thought out. The houses faced inward. So and this is not uncommon. They did this in Rome, and it's actually a nice design for a house. You go into the back door, and the front door basically leads into a courtyard. So your yard is like private. The house is built all around it. It's just a good idea for a house. It's pretty common. Living out in the desert, it's hot, right? How do you stay comfortable? Old idea, but it works. You got to have thick walls, have good thick walls, good thick old walls, big heavy thick ceiling, and fairly low ceiling. And then you put just a pool of water in the middle of the room, and it's pretty comfortable. You get used to it. We get a little addicted to air. They didn't have central air back then, but we're addicted to central air. Once you get it, you can't not have it. If you've never had it, it's like, whatever. Why do you need that, man? I'm perfectly comfortable in this room with a pool in the middle. This is the ziggurat of Ur. They're rebuilding it, but it kind of gives you an idea. It's in pretty good shape. They've rebuilt it, but it gives you the scale. It kind of gives you an idea, and you got to imagine it was a huge city built around this. Here's a very imaginative 3D Blender whatever recreation of Babylon. Give you the idea. It kind of gives you the feeling. It looks not like they're just making this stuff up, but that's probably actually kind of not too unlike what it would have looked like. It's just a neat picture. It's kind of just going to give you the idea, give you the feel of it. Babylon, great, just a huge metropolis. It's 53 miles. Babylon is 53 miles south of Baghdad. And Saddam Hussein was trying to to rebuild Babylon. Saddam Hussein, the despot. Despots are always good builders. Mussolini was a good builder. Hitler would have been a good builder. He wanted to spend more time building once he got this genocide and conquering the world out of the way. But it was crazy designs for Germania. Certainly Mussolini built some cool things in Italy. All the Caesars, the Romans. But yeah, old Saddam Hussein had good ideas. He should have just stuck to architecture. And he's rebuilding Babylon, right? That's cool. All right, man. Yeah, go ahead, rebuild Babylon. And of course, the war comes. The Americans, man, we just rolled right over it. Sorry, we got battling to do. We don't have time for your rebuilding these ruins. This is a cool, imaginative repainting illustration of Babylon. Just neat. Got the Tower of Babel from fantasy, it didn't look like that, but kind of give you an idea. And actually, most of it could be fairly accurate, except for the way too tall Tower of Babel in the background. This is a good. Then the Northern Renaissance did the best paintings of the Tower of Babel. This is just incredible. I love this. It's just an awesome painting. This one is one of my favorites. This is Bruegel, Peter Bruegel the Elder, did this awesome painting of the Tower of Babel. Just super imaginative, just crazy detail. It's just so awesome. It's old Nimrod. So Nimrod down here, I guess Nimrod is there. According to legend, Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. So old Nimrod's in there. Baghdad. So here's Baghdad, not too far from Babylon, but much, much later. Babylon's way back. We're looking back, and we're still sort of tangenting away from the 2500 BCE. So this is just the Mesopotamia as we're going through time. This is Baghdad. Baghdad was a round city. It's cool. Baghdad was rebuilt. There's always something there. 762 is the year we give for building the round city of Baghdad, or its completion, or the point that they decided to break a bottle of champagne on it, or whatever. And it's a round city, man. Baghdad is where you would have really wanted to be in the 9th, 10th century. That was the place where that things were clean. You didn't have to worry about getting robbed when you walked down the street. So, round city of Baghdad. And here's Baghdad today. This that big dome, that big blue dome, I believe that's one of Saddam's projects. He was building at the time the largest mosque in the world. So again, as cool as the round city of Baghdad is nothing compared to today. Nothing compared to today. So lots of civilizations coming out of the Mesopotamian area. And in India, about the same time, okay, I just want to kind of get you an idea of these civilizations that are really getting pretty big in what we understand. Even the term civilization is kind of a problematic term, maybe, or how it's been used in the past. Maybe not how I'm using it now, but these societies, seem very technically advanced societies, pretty big technically advanced societies growing up about this time. You see 4 of them. So in India. This has, again, only been discovered fairly recently. We were certain something was there, but this is 20th century stuff. Nobody remembered it. They've been lost in history. Mohenjo-daro, Mound of the Dead, the Indus Valley civilization in India. Indus Valley civilization had maybe 5-10 million people in it. And Mohenjo-daro here had maybe 20 to 40,000. So you got 20 to 40,000 people in Mohenjo-daro at 2500 BCE. Babylon had maybe 250,000, but it's at its peak, so much later. And Rome had 1.5 million people at its peak, but again, much later. 20 to 40,000 people is pretty good for 2500 BCE in India, where nothing else is around for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. The Indus Valley civilization itself had 5 to 10 million people, so just pretty big. I mean, think of a country today with 10 million people in it. They made a Bollywood movie out Mohenjo-daro. This is, I guarantee you, did not look like, maybe it did. Maybe everybody back then was beautiful and had white teeth and they sang and danced because it was a paradise. And they had very typical hero's quest type adventures. So this is the Bollywood movie Mohenjo-daro, but it's awesome. It's definitely worth watching. And one of the reasons is the sets and the models, 3D renderings are so awesome. This is a good, again, just to get the feeling. I'm sure they put some research into it. If you're going to make a model of Mohenjo-daro, you're going to at least read the Wikipedia page and kind of get an idea of what's going on. So hopefully this kind of gives you a feel. A lot of people have never seen anything like this, nothing like it, only a few places in the world even close to this big. Egypt's still by far just monster over everybody else. Here's another still from the movie. So kind of, I just think they did a great job with the sets and stuff. You feel great Bollywood movie, very wholesome, very wholesome. This is a better technical rendering to sort of give you an idea of the scale. Pre-planned, got walls around it. The baths, we know they had some kind of ritual or communal bathing going on. It's very neat civilization in India. Now, on the other side of the world, in Peru, we have Norte Chico. Norte Chico, again, this is only fairly recently, but in the past few decades, we didn't even know this was a thing. So this is, again, about the same time as Egypt, Mesopotamia growing up big, Mohenjo-daro. This is in Peru, so it's in the Americas. The Car El Supe, certainly mispronounced civilization. Maybe not mispronounced. That's not too complicated. No evidence of warfare. This has only been recently discovered. There's who knows what else is to be found. Like I said, under the Sahara. Who knows? The Gobi Desert. Maybe even the Americas. But certainly Peru. Peru's had this civilization. They really never, unless they disappeared. A lot of these, I speculate. I'm a big science fiction fan. I like alternate history too. In Peru, there's been people living there all the way up into today, of course. But this particular civilization, up into the Incas, really. So this is like way pre-Inca. No evidence of warfare. Inca's very interesting civilization. This is Kipu. This is the way they write. Nobody's been able to translate this. We can translate a lot of writing. Nobody's been able to translate this Kipu. Basically, it's tying a knot in. I'm going to send a message to my mom. Give me a piece of thread. Tie some knots in it. Here you go. Hand this to my mom. She, oh, my goodness. Oh, I'm glad Cynthia's doing all right. I thought she had the COVID. Nobody's ever been able to. I don't know. Maybe AI will be able to translate this. And they all the way up to the Incas. They're using this Kipu. They're writing in these little strings and tying. And of course, the conquistadors come in, and we lose all how to do that. Nobody said, "Hey, man, before I kill you, will you tell me how to read those strings? I could probably learn a lot from that." Nope, that's not the way it worked. That's not the way history went down. But if the Incas would have had the cannon, they would have gone over to Europe and conquered. So that is the way history works. Again, in England, just to give you an idea, we have the Peru, we have Mesopotamia, we have Egypt, we have the Indus Valley and India. Everybody, there's a few small things here, like this is the best they had in England. Not bad, but not a huge city like we have in these other places. So that's England, about the same time. Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids are about the same time. That's an easy fact. Help you put a little anchor in your little calendar of time. I like little anchors and calendars of time. 2500 BCE, before the Common Era, we had Stonehenge, and we had the Great Pyramid of Giza. So China, you hear that China's had all these great old civilizations, and that's true, but they were a little late to the game. Same time as Egypt, and 2500 BCE. China didn't have anything huge like that. Maybe not. Now, they built a lot of things out of wood. That's one of the problems with Mesopotamia. A lot of it's built out of, clay brick. Eventually, that's just going to erode. Egyptians, one of the reasons it's so fabulous and Egypt so compelling is they built so much out of stone. So it just lasts. You could build huge buildings as big out of brick, for sure, and out of wood. All the wood's gone. All the wood's gone. So a lot of the Chinese things were made out of wood. But we have no evidence that China had anything close to that level. So they would soon. They would soon within 1,000 years. One contribution that I find really interesting, and I would like to think that it's a big deal, a bigger deal in architecture than it probably is feng shui. Feng shui, certainly it's a big part of interior design. But feng shui is just basically how, if you don't know, how you lay your furniture around the room. There's a lot of woo-woo to it, a lot of nonsense woo-woo to it. But a lot of it is just absolutely practical. Like, you don't put your toilet where you can see it from the kitchen. Okay, that's practical. Hide your television. Get one of those, instead of having a big black square in the middle of the room, how about you get one of those, like, just put a photograph up there. Just put a picture of a pretty landscape. Put a picture frame around it, you know? That's feng shui. It doesn't have to be crazy. Get rid of your clutter. Goodness sakes, man. Clean up. Don't just throw stuff all over. Isn't it nice to have it all tidy? Yeah, there's plenty of good things to say about feng shui. So that's a great Chinese contribution to, I hope it's taken more seriously by architects. It's a kind of Chinese geomancy. Geomancy is just arranging objects. And like I say, I really hope it is part of architecture today. It seems like there's these people have been thinking about this for a long time, and a lot of it's practical, a lot of it's woo-woo probably way outweighs the practical. But if you do find a good book on feng shui that's just not written analytically and not continentally, get an analytically written feng shui book if you can, and then that'll help you out. Jumping ahead. Okay, jump way ahead. To give you an idea of like really early civilizations, 2500 BC. Now we're going to jump way ahead. We're going to jump way ahead to Greece. Greece going to invent Western civilization. Greece, that's wildly exaggerated too. I've heard strong arguments that the Greeks stole everything from the Egyptians. They're just rewriting getting old Egyptian books and translating them. They didn't come up with anything. I've heard that argument. But according to legend, a Western civilization was invented by the Greeks. This is just a wonderful painting by Lawrence Alma-Tadema. I just love this painting. It's a Victorian painting. Beautiful painting. So they had the Greeks thinking, reading from Homer, reading this great literature. That's what they did. They sat around and think. The classical Greek period, the Golden Age of Athens. Golden Age of Athens was a relatively short time. It's about 75 years. 480 to 404 BCE. Everybody who's anybody in ancient Greece that you've heard of all lived in this 75-year period. Everybody you've ever heard of. This is basically during the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War between 431 and 404, so the last part of it. That's the end of the Golden Age of Athens, which is really the Golden Age of Greece. The Persians come over. If you saw the movie 300 and 300 Part 2, the Persians come over and the Greeks chase them away. Greeks beat the Persians. So then they get their empire. Everything's great. It's the Golden Age of Greece. We defeated the Persians. We don't have this enormous civilization over here, looking over our shoulder all the time. We chased them off. And then what do? What the Greeks eventually just get in a fight with themselves. So the Spartans versus the Athenians, Peloponnesian War. Spartans win, spoiler. If you know anything about the Spartans, if you saw the movie 300, you understand why the Spartans won. So yeah, I knew the answer to that. Who was going to win that one when they first took up arms. But all the culture was in Athens. They strove, like the Incas, strove for perfection. The Incas and the civilizations before the Incas over in Peru, they were striving for perfection in everything. The Greeks were the same way. The Greeks were a little more warlike, at least than the pre-Inca pre-Inca civilizations. In looking for perfection, we have three column styles that everybody should know. If you don't know this, you should know this. This is the Doric column style, the Ionic column style, and the Corinthian column style. Those are your three column styles from classical Greece. Still use them today, particularly that Ionic. You see it on the post office, all over the place, looking for perfection, And this is, I'm sure you've seen this before, this is the Parthenon. This is a painting by Church. This is a great. Church is awesome. In painting, we'll look at the Hudson River School. Alma Tadema up there that painted the Greek one's awesome. And he's about the same time. Church is just like dynamite. So here's the Parthenon. 447 through 432 BCE. About the time of the Peloponnesian War, just a little bit before, right before this, every time everything's great, man. We built this big temple, and then bam, we got to fighting the Spartans. Everybody, as I said, everybody who was anybody lived in Greece at this time. Sophocles, Plato, Thucydides wrote a great book about the Peloponnesian War. He was in it. Pericles was kind of like the mayor. Pericles commissioned the Parthenon. Hippocrates, father of medicine. Sophocles, the theater, everything's coming from this. Phidias, the great sculptor, we'll be talking a lot about him. And Herodotus, the father of history, all at the same time and all hanging out together, hanging out at the same coffee shop. And when we look at Herodotus, we want to look at, and everybody should know this too, like your three column styles. Everybody should know the three column styles of ancient Greece, of classical Greece. And everybody should also know the seven wonders of the ancient world. These are the seven wonders of the ancient world, which is attributed to Herodotus, though we don't have any actual writing to. He's a father of history. Give him credit. The ideas were kind of floating around Herodotus' time. I'm sure he was aware of them. So, father of history, father of lies, they call him, unfortunately. The first of these seven wonders of the ancient world would be your first guess, the Great Pyramid of Giza. You've seen it before. You'll see it again. Imagine that. Now, this is huge. Like I say, nothing was as big as Egypt. These other civilizations, wow, that's really impressive, man, what you're doing in Peru, but nothing. And hold a candle to Egypt. So Egypt is really old. Like I say, this is when Herodotus, this is a couple thousand years before the classical age, of Greece. So when Herodotus is getting his list of the seven wonders that are attributed to him, this is old. This has been around for 2,000 years. At the time that the pyramid was built, to give you an idea of the size, Memphis was the largest city in Egypt at the time. Had about 100,000 people. That's a pretty decent sized city today. The empire of Egypt had maybe 2 to 4 million at the 2500 BCE when they built the Great Pyramid. There were maybe 50 million people in the world at the time. So possibly you could make the argument that as many as 1/5, that's being incredibly optimistic, as many as 1/5 of the world's population lived in Egypt. There's a huge civilization. There's only so many people, but of those people, this is where they were. The West Bank, where all of these items are, their tombs, of course, it's the realm of the dead, That's the West Bank. So the first of these seven wonders of the ancient world is the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Speaking of pyramids, you see pyramids all over the world, and you watch the History Channel to get your ancient alien stuff. We're talking about pyramids. What a coincidence, man! There's pyramids all over the world. Well, if you're stacking rocks and trying to go high, you're really going to end up with one shape. Yeah, a lot of them are four-sided, but anyway, that's not a big coincidence. So you're building, you're stacking your rocks. You're going to start with a wide pile and get to a small pile. That's just the way pyramids. And they're saying there's other suspected pyramids around the world that are yet to be found. These big mountains. People look at these mountains and I saw one in Siberia. It's an enormous thing. If that's really a pyramid, it's going to be the biggest pyramid ever in some civilization we never heard of. So pyramids are just because stacking stones, you end up with that shape. Another thing you see that has a little bit of woo-woo behind it is even Stonehenge, and these items, really just lined up perfectly with solstice, just the level of sun. And basically, look, if you got a hole in the wall and there's and the light shining through it, the sunlight, you're marking it with a piece of charcoal, moving it along. There's going to be one day that it starts going back in the other direction. So if you get that mark where the sun stops and goes back in the other direction, that's where you're going to build your idol or whatever. Not that hard to do. Not that hard to do. So the Great Pyramid was the tallest building in the world for the longest time, and it originally had limestone all over it. So it was bright white. So here you have it like bright white. So it's the tallest building in the world for a long time. It's just pretty big. It was the tallest building, and now it's just ruins now. But it had this bright white, so it's this clean white, just glowing at you with the sun shining out it. Really, really super dramatic. Tallest building in the world until 1311 when they built Lincoln Cathedral here. Lincoln Cathedral started 1072, and it took them 239 years to build this. This is pretty cool, just to give you an idea. So you imagine the pyramid, but this Lincoln Cathedral is not as tall because part of it blew off. Here you go. This model shows you. So see, you got like where it not fell off. You got where it fell off there. You can see this big spire, this bigger spire. That was the part that's higher than the pyramid. So the other one's not as high as the pyramid. So the pyramid, the Great Pyramid becomes the tallest building in the world again. At this point, it's the Great Pyramid is 481 feet. So it's 481 feet. That's pretty tall. That's pretty tall. It's taller than me for sure. This is the tallest building in the world today. The Burj Khalifa, there in Dubai. It is 2,717 feet. So it's about six times as high as the Great Pyramid. In the 20th century, almost all the tallest buildings were in the United States. Up until, and it was 1990. 1990, the Bank of China Tower in Hong Kong. This was still when Hong Kong was British, but everybody knew that there's no way the British are going to be. They're going to try, but no way. So 1997, Hong Kong goes back to it's complicated. Anyway, Hong Kong goes back to China. So 1990, so it's all the United States, all in the 20th century, building these tall skyscrapers. And then in 1990, we get China. Now the tallest building in America is One World Trade Center, the new World Trade Center. It's the seventh tallest. We got one within the top 10. Now we have one within the top 10. They used to all be in America. Now we have one within the top 10 now in 2023, and that trend doesn't look like it's changing, unfortunately. So, what's the second wonder of the ancient world? Second wonder of the ancient world. The lighthouse at Alexandria. Alexandria in Egypt, northern Egypt. Alexander, named after Alexander the Great. Paced it off. His follower, his general that worked under him, Ptolemy, gets, when Alexander divides up his empire. I've heard Alexander the Great described as a functioning alcoholic, Alexander the Great was. But he divides his empire, and huge empire now. Basically, Alexander conquered the Persian Empire. Say conquered the world, but he conquered the Persian Empire, added it to the Greek, the Macedonian Empire. But the Persian Empire included Egypt. So he gets Egypt. Alexander gets here. He starts Alexandria and paces off the city. Build me a city, so it's all pre-planned, and it becomes the center of learning after Athens. Alexandria long becomes the center, the great library at Alexandria. Cleopatra was a Ptolemy. She was Greek. She was descendant of the general that fought for Alexander. Lighthouse of Alexander lasted a long time. I think nearly 1,000 years. It's mortar. For mortar, it used iron. So yeah, this great lighthouse. Great lighthouse at Alexandria. Lasted a long time, survived a lot of earthquakes, but finally one earthquake was just a straw that broke the camel's back. So that's number two. The lighthouse at Alexandria. And then we have the Colossus of Rhodes, number 3. The Colossus of Rhodes. Rhodes, the big island in the Mediterranean. Rhodes. Yeah, the Colossus. I've seen this is a drawing, of course. I've seen drawings. According to legend, the ships would go up under his legs, like he'd spread his legs, and they were so big he could go up under his legs. Probably not. When you think about the Colossus of Rhodes, the Colossus, giant of Rhodes, think about the Statue of Liberty. It's about people that put together the Statue of Liberty were looking to be like the Colossus of Rhodes. It has the same, the sun hat there with the beams coming out of it. Drawings I've seen of the Colossus of Rhodes have the hand sticking straight up. So believe me, when they were building the Statue of Liberty, they were saying, we want to make a replica of the Colossus of Rhodes. Give you an idea of the size of it. Can't see the Colossus of Rhodes, you can see the Statue of Liberty. The fourth of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. Mausoleum is a proper name. This is a fella's tomb, Mausolus. Mausolus had such a fine tomb that all later tombs were named for him. So really, a mausoleum should be a proper name. Halicarnassus is a city in Turkey. So he had this beautiful tomb that was so legendary and awesome that he had some deep pockets. So mausoleum at Halicarnassus, named after Mausolus. The fifth of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. In Ephesus, this is 4 times the size of the Parthenon. Greeks tended to build pretty similarly. They built the same city over and over and again because it's the perfect city, man. Why are we going to change it? We got it figured out. This is what a city's supposed to look like. But this was a big one, and it's a lot of really interesting history behind the Temple of Artemis. It was a sanctuary. You kill a man, you go to the Temple of Artemis and beg, please give me sanctuary. Not allowed to. Nobody can touch you if you're in their protection. Eventually, they didn't want him so much hanging around a temple. So I said, you can go within 2 miles of the temple. Go live over there, man. You're taking up space. All these asylum seekers. But anyway, so it was a huge thing. It was a great temple of Artemis. It was burned down in 356 BCE by Herostratus. Herostratus burned it down. And if you've ever heard of the term herostratic fame is fame for just doing something awful. Like you get famous for burning down the Temple of Artemis. That's herostratic fame. A similar term is Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus was a Greek general. And a Pyrrhic victory is a victory won, but at such cost that you might as well just not have fought at all. So yeah, Pyrrhus won the battle against the Romans, but he lost so many men. It's like, wow, man, we'd have been a lot better off if we'd have just surrendered. So a Pyrrhic victory, and herostatic fame. Artemis was the twin of Apollo, the goddess of the hunt, the moon, etc. And this was her temple where you could get asylum. The 6th wonder of the ancient world, attributed to Herodotus and others, is the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Now, this would have been carved by Phidias, or created by Phidias, sculpted by Phidias. Phidias is a great sculptor, also did the Athena at the Parthenon in Athens. So to Zeus, it's one of the 7 wonders, and this is an imaginative recreation. I imagine these things were incredibly lifelike, considering how good Greek, the little Greek sculpture we have, and copies of these Greek sculptures that we have are so good. And Phidias was considered the best of the best. So this thing was probably just really, really looked like a god. I'm telling you, it would be just absolutely spectacular to see. Too big. It kind of made fun of it because it was, if he actually stood up, he couldn't stand up in the temple because he's sitting down, so it's too tall. Caligula, the evil emperor Caligula, was gonna get the statue of Zeus at Olympia from the Olympics. That's where they have the Olympics, Mount Olympus, and take it back to Rome. Caligula was going to take the statue of Zeus back to Rome. He's going to chop the head off and put his own head on it. And before he could do this, before he could get the statue to Rome, the Praetorian Guard kills Caligula because he really deserved it. And as they say, the statue of Zeus laughed. Ha 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 ha. Oh, Caligula, man, you know better than to mess with Zeus. Should have known better. And the seventh, and we know almost nothing about what this is supposed to be. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. We really have no idea. Also heard the Walls of Babylon. We do have a pretty good idea what the Walls of Babylon. I've seen a lot of paintings of the Walls of Babylon. They're pretty consistent. So I'm assuming it's based on something. But this is the Hanging Gardens, and this is just an old printed postcard or something like that. So take of it what you will. We really don't know what the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are. So that's your seven wonders of the ancient world. You got your Great Pyramid. You've got your lighthouse at Alexandria. You've got your Colossus of Rhodes. You've got your mausoleum at Halicarnassus. You have Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Statue of Zeus at Olympia. And the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. All right, as the seven wonders. Every educated person should know a little bit about the seven wonders. Rome. This is an awesome painting by Jerome, French painter, kind of 1900s. Awesome painting. They love this sort of historical stuff, and he's great. But anyway, this is a very dramatic Roman kind of gladiators having a good time. So Rome. Rome started out with kings, Romulus and Remus. They started out with kings, and then the Romans decided they didn't like their kings. They overthrew their kings, killed the kings. Brutus, et Brute, his ancestor, was one of the people that killed a king. Brutus killed a king. So they have a republic. For a long time, and not up until Caesar and Augustus do we end up with an empire. There were as many as 90 million, probably 50 to 90 million people in the Roman Empire at a time that there were 200 to 300 million people in the entire world. So you're talking maybe 1/6 to half the population of the world was in the Roman Empire during its peak. ChatGPT told me it was 80%, but this is July 2023, and ChatGPT's not. Yeah, it makes a few mistakes. You can always ask it its source. They were great engineers. The Romans were great engineers. I've heard the Roman war described as really war by engineering. You know, they would build these siege equipments. You didn't really want to fight if you didn't have to. If you could build something to keep them away or build some kind of contraption to kill people, that made sense. Just really efficient. This kind of efficiency is going to become kind of part of Western culture and move into the Industrial Revolution, which just really goes all over the world, making these kind of historical narratives. It was really very much against postmodernism, and all just totally artificial. So, but Rome did have a certain culture. I would make the argument that cultures have a sort of personality in the sense that a football team, Auburn fans are like that, Alabama fans are like this. I'm from Alabama, so that's the way we look at it. So, them Auburn fans, man, the way they are, man. So cultures kind of have an identity, but it's no deeper than that. It's no deeper than that. This is the Pantheon. It's still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Romans made a lot of it's mostly concrete, but they had a secret they're always discovering this Roman concrete formula. It could dry underwater. All this is built out of concrete. Just throw up these cities all over the place. Look at this aqueduct. It's just monstrous. Things still surviving today. Just all of this engineering and city planning. It's just marvelous. Just they're really, really great builders. Very organized. A lot to be said for organization and systematic thinking. Here's the Colosseum. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Colosseum. You may not know that the Colosseum gets its name from another statue, another Colossus. This Colossus, Nero builds this giant statue to himself outside. Well, I think the Colosseum came later. Nero builds this giant statue to him. So the Colosseum gets its name from the Colossus, which was a statue of Nero. So all Colosseums are named after this vanity project that Nero built for himself. I love this model. Somebody went to so much trouble to build this model in Rome, of ancient Rome, and it's just awesome. It really gives you the sense of what a huge metropolis this was, what an incredibly sophisticated city this was. It's just mind-blowing. This would make a great train set. Unfortunately, there were no trains back then. Maybe you could make some kind of ships. Have ships, and maybe you make a wagon set. Have a wagon set. Have a wagon set go through it. All right, another idea that the Romans gave us is the arch, the triumphal arch. Triumphal arch is for a triumph. If a Roman general, so the Romans killed a king, the old Brutus the elder kills the king to have a republic. Vote. Supposedly the people could vote. You had representatives, kind of a republic, as good as you can get back then. And then the generals start getting more and more powerful. You get Caesar being so powerful. Some people wanted to make him a king. Mark Antony says, "Can we not crown you king, Caesar?" And Caesar says, "What do I need to be king for? I'm Caesar." He already had the power, just being a powerful Roman emperor. Being a powerful Roman general. The first emperor will be Julius Caesar's grandnephew, Augustus, first emperor. Augustus, good emperor. And then we get, he solved all the problems. Nice to have an emperor. And they slowly get crazy. So don't give anybody too much power. You can see how that works with the American ideals. We don't want anybody having too much power. Don't want anybody having too much power. This is the Arch of Constantine. It's actually pieced together through a lot of older things. They threw it up pretty quick, so they got a lot of statues and stuff that weren't being used. The Arch of Constantine. Rome had its ups and downs. Caesar was good and competent. Augustus was good and competent. You got crazy leaders like Caligula wanting to bring the statue to replace his head. A lot of crazier things than that. Nero's crazy. Some good ones. Marcus Aurelius. But towards the end of the Western Roman Empire, we're starting 100 years before we call it the end, we have Constantine. And Constantine will have a battle with another guy that was there basically fighting for emperor. They're going to battle at the Mulvian Bridge. Constantine and Maxentius both fighting over who gets to be emperor. Constantine spent a lot of his time training up in England, oddly enough. So Constantine looks in the sky before the battle and he sees crucifix, and he sees the words, "With this sign ye shall conquer." I used to smoke Pall Mall cigarettes, and it had in Latin on the Pall Mall. I don't think it does anymore, which is a shame. Had "Will this sign ye shall conquer" on the Pall Mall cigarettes. I have no idea why that was on a pack of cigarettes, but I like that fact that it was. So Constantine looks up, according to legend, looks up in the sky, sees crucifix, says, "With this sign ye shall conquer." He conquers, and then he legalizes Christianity when he becomes emperor. Constantine's mom was a Christian, so it wasn't good. It could have been that underground by the time Constantine was around, but as things start turning. And he builds this triumphal arch. Now, the triumphal arch is when the emperor wins, he has a triumph. Bread and circuses for everybody, free wine, big old party, because you're bringing in all this treasure, man, all these treasure and slaves. You don't need to work because somebody went out there and got a bunch of treasure and slaves, man. Good, giving them to everybody. Good for you. Thanks, emperor. So here go Constantine, he's building this arch. So this is the arch, and they'd have a triumph, and they would go through the arch, and the emperor would have it. There would be a slave holding his crown of his laurels, his grass crown above the head of the general, whoever won the battle, thinking, "You are but a man. You are but a man. You are not a god. Don't let this go to your head." The laurels, Caesar wore laurels because he was going bald, and he was kind of vain. He was sort of vain. But the laurels is like the highest honor you can get as a soldier. Doesn't come from the top down. It's not like a medal. If you're really brave out there on the battlefield, do a lot of slashing and chopping and running into the battle, your fellow soldiers, if they so respect you, will get the humble grass of the battlefield and make a grass crown and give you the laurels. So that's the greatest thing, it's not coming from the top down. It is your fellow soldiers respect you enough to give you that. So they're holding this representation of that above the great general's head, and if saying, "You're not a god, you're not, don't let it go to your head." The emperors eventually will let it go to, long before Constantine. This is the Arch of Titus. Titus is about 250 years before Constantine, so a bit earlier. The arches have been around for a while. And Titus here is the one that levels Jerusalem in 70. It's another good year. 70 of the Common Era is when Titus, that's it. That's the end of Jerusalem. The Jews scattered all over the world. A lot of them going to Rome, but they're not staying there. You can sleep where you want tonight, but you're not staying here. Titus took and leveled the place. You're too much trouble, Jews. And the Muslims did let them back in, but the Romans weren't going to let them back in. You do what you say, you pay your taxes, keep your mouth shut, everything's fine. Rebellion, well, that's not the way we roll, says Titus. So they end up leveling it. So that's the Arch of Titus conquering the Jews. And they keep on making the arches. This is the Arch of Triumph in France. Napoleon's big on them. You can go up there. You can go up in this one. Look around. Look out over the city. So Napoleon, still the tradition. The Arc of Triumph. They're in Paris. A little bit later, in 1852, still making triumphal arches. Same kind of thing. You win a battle. This was built by Ludwig IV of Bavaria, and it's in Munich. Beautiful arch. I like the way this looks. It's very pretty, very, very good, very nice German design. Very, very pretty. Germany didn't become a country till late. Neither did Italy. Germany didn't become a country until 1871. It was really the Holy Roman Empire in the middle of Europe, just millions and millions, tons and tons of kingdoms. And here we have in America, we Americans have our own triumphal arch in Washington Square, the Washington Square Arch. Washington Square Arch here in New York City, right? New York City got the Washington Square Arch, but we don't have generals and king. We have generals, but they're just public servants, like a postman, a dog catcher, humble public servants. So the Washington Square, George Washington, this was built on the centennial of George Washington stepping down from office, saying 2 terms is plenty. I'm just a president. I'm just a working slob. I'm clocking in and doing my job as president, and now I'm going to retire. Very much kind of a Roman idea. Of the dictators. The original dictators would sort of come to serve. Dictator used not to be a bad word. Dictator Cincinnatus. The city of Cincinnati is named after Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus, working on a farm. He was a great soldier, but he's retired, and they come such trouble. It's like, Cincinnatus, please come and be the dictator and solve this problem. So Cincinnatus rolls up his sleeves, vanquishes the enemy, and then takes off his uniform, goes back to the farm, humble farm, just getting a paycheck like a regular guy. That's a very Roman ideal that went to America. So George Washington stepping down. I'm just a regular Joe, just a working man, just a government employee. That was the great sign America, our great tradition of The peaceful transfer of power. The peaceful transfer of power. Basically, the Washington Square Arch, the Great American Arch, stands for the peaceful transfer of power. Started by the tradition of George Washington and ended in 2020. Oh well, we had a good run. Hopefully we will get back into the habit of our peaceful transfers of power. Okay, and finally, Constantine, Western Roman Empire, which falls, quote unquote, Western Roman Empire in Italy, falls, quote unquote, again. 476. Easy date to remember because it's the 4th century and 76, like 1776. Followed the Western Roman Empire. So Constantine, powerful emperor, moves the Roman Empire. Things are already starting to go kind of south. So this city's getting dirty, it's old. Decides to build a new city over where the Black Sea meets the Mediterranean. Great location. So he builds Constantinople and moves the capital over there. It's a little more Greek area, not so much a Latin area. So what we will see is, as going forward, the Western Roman Empire, 476, supposedly falls, and then there's an Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, which will last up until 1453, when the Ottoman Turks are finally able to breach the walls because they have cannons. They call themselves Romans, so for the next 1,000 years, they will still be a Roman Empire according to the Romans. The Western Roman Empire is what people mean when they say the fall of Rome, 476 and such, and in Western European history. But Constantinople is going strong for a long time. So we're going to end here. This is the Hagia Sophia, built by Justinian about 100 years after Constantine, and everybody's Christian by this point. So Constantine legalizes Christianity, then it becomes the official religion of the empire. So the Byzantine Empire is all going to be Christian. Paganism the pagans get fed to the lions, if you will. All right, that's it. That's part one, from the very earliest civilizations, earliest cities, to up until the end of the Western Roman Empire and the beginning of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Hagia Sophia, and they'll last for a long time. All right, that's it. I'll see you in part two.